Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another Reddit Stories video. Today, we're diving into a truly thrilling and spine-chilling topic: terrifying true Reddit stories. All the stories we're covering today are verified and true, and let me tell you, some of them are downright disturbing. Personally, I find true stories to be the most fascinating because, well, they're real, which makes them even scarier, unsettling, and sometimes downright weird. Whether you're studying, relaxing, trying to fall asleep, or just looking for an engaging video to enjoy, this one will fit perfectly into whatever vibe you're going for. Before we jump into the stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, and your support would mean the world to us. Alright, let's get into it. My wife stepped on something in the lake. The next day, they found a body. A few years ago, when my daughter was a toddler, my wife and I used to take her to a nearby lake to picnic, swim, and just unwind. It was a peaceful spot, quiet, not too crowded, the kind of place where you could easily forget about the world for a while. One afternoon, after we'd finished eating, my wife decided to go for a quick swim while I stayed on the beach with our daughter. I watched her wade out into the water, the sun sparkling off the surface. A minute later, she suddenly stopped and turned to me, shouting something. At first, I couldn't make out what she said, but her expression was off. Then I heard her clearly. "I think I just stepped on someone's face." I froze for a second, thinking maybe she was joking. But the look on her face wasn't playful, it was pale, almost terrified. She quickly started making her way back to the shore, her legs moving faster, like she couldn't get out of the water fast enough. When she got back to me, she was visibly shaken. She said that while she was swimming, her foot brushed against something soft, and at first, she thought it was a rock or a weird patch of seaweed. But when she pressed her foot down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the water, a nose, an eye socket. She swore she felt the hollow of the eye. I considered going in to check it out, but something stopped me. The unease in my gut, maybe. We decided to pack up and leave right after that. The next day, the local news reported that a young boy who had been missing for days was found drowned in that same lake, not far from where we had been. He'd been there the whole time, just beneath the surface. To this day, my wife is convinced she stepped on his face. The moment I realized how naive I am. I work night shifts at a liquor store. There are some costumers who come in, ask for almond chocolate, nothing else, and walk away. I asked my manager to order more almond chocolates since it's highly requested at night. My manager seemed surprised. During the day they barely sell any almond chocolate. One night an odd guy walks in, asks for almond chocolate. I reply, "I'm sorry, we are out." Then he starts crying. He is going items frantically. He says, "I need aluminium foil now." I ask him to leave the store. I sit down to relax and I Google aluminium foil and almond chocolate. Turns out they do drugs using the aluminium foil. It's well known in the drug community chocolates with nuts are wrapped in foil to prevent turning stale. My fat ass would have never thought someone is more excited about the wrapping than the chocolate. I hugged a murderer who was also my pastor. So I grew up going to a Christian church from birth. Very small and family-like, we loved it as kids. In 2008, so I was about 9 years old at this time, we found out that someone had committed suicide in our church. It was super strange and unexpected for the church people. A few months later we found out that the pastor's wife passed away. He beat her and tried to stage a car accident. When she passed away, our pastor threw her a memorial service at the church. On that Sunday, me and my family showed up to show support for him and her family. You know how at funerals people stand in a line and you usually walk up and hug them? Yeah, same thing here. We walk away and give our respects, and I hugged him. He got away with it for over a year before people started questioning the whole situation. That whole time he was still preaching our church and just continuing on his life. So fast forward a little and they realize my pastor killed his wife. But then some people start questioning the death of his first wife from 1999. Y'all, this man killed 2 wives. Got away with one and almost got away with the second one. The person who committed suicide, we later also found out he killed himself because the pastor was also having an affair with another member of the church who was also married. I was not only close to this man, but I slept in the same house as him on our Bible retreats and such. Super creepy and makes me have a lot of trust issues. I'm not going to hurt you. Remembering these words still sends a chill up my spine. This was a few years ago. My 33 meters husband, 43 and I were getting gas late one night. This was a bit of a weird gas station, where two roads intersected at an angle, with the gas station being on the acute angle, if you can picture that. At the pump we chose, there were no working lights and it was difficult to see directly from either road. We were driving a soft-top Jeep Wrangler with all of the rear windows taken off. My husband got out to pump, and I was sitting in the passenger seat looking at my phone. That's when I heard it. "I'm not going to hurt you," a wavery voice said some distance behind me. I froze, suddenly terrified. I turned around to look out the empty space where our back window used to be, and saw what appeared to be a homeless man a little ways off. He had slightly wild gray hair, a washed-out beanie, and an oversized jacket with lots of pockets that hid his hands. I suddenly realized how dark it was, and how hard it was for anyone to see us. And I couldn't see his hands. I had a distinct feeling from deep down, so prominent I could almost hear it. "Run. But we're just pumping gas. He's just a weird homeless dude." My husband and I were from Key West. We had seen plenty of them before and they were almost all harmless. So, I slowly turned back around and went back to my phone. Yet I still heard him. The distinct sound of shuffling feet. The rustle of his jacket. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. "I just need some help. Do you have any money? I'm not going to hurt you." At this point I could tell he was almost at the Jeep. We had only been there a couple of minutes, and we'd been on almost empty. There was no way the tank was full. Without warning, my husband rushed into the car and hurried to start the engine. I could tell his hands were shaking. He managed to throw the car into drive and we peeled out of there. I looked behind us and saw the man standing there, not reacting, next to the dangling nozzle my husband hadn't bothered hanging back up. As we turned out of the gas station, my husband said, "I just had the most horrible feeling. Something in me just told me to run." I looked at him in horror, and told him I'd felt the same thing. I felt tears come to my eyes as I thanked him for listening to his instincts. We went home feeling quite shaken, just going over the events we had just seen and the fear we had felt. It was a day or two later that we watched a YouTube video by a security analyst, Scott Stewart, on the Kenyan mall shooting, and he said that in every event like this there are people who said, right before it happened, "I had a terrible feeling that something bad was about to happen." He adds that some people listen to that feeling and leave the area, while others mention how much they regret not listening to it. I burst into tears hearing this, knowing the feeling he had described all too well. I had had that feeling, and was one of those who ignored it. I remember crying, "Thank you," at my husband for listening to his sense of danger. Now, it is fully possible this was just a harmless person, asking for money in a slightly creepy way, and that nothing bad would have happened. But, I can't stop remembering how the weird angles kept anyone from seeing us. I can't stop thinking about how dark it was. And I can't stop thinking about his hidden hands. And I still get full body chills remembering him say, "I'm not going to hurt you." Moral of the story, I guess, if you ever get that distinct feeling that something bad is imminent, leave the area. It may be a false alarm, and if it happens a lot you may have a hyperactive anxiety response and might want to try Lexapro. But it's better than going through the rest of your life wishing you had listened to that feeling. I realized someone was watching me. A few years ago, I lived on the second floor of an old apartment building. One night, I was up late binge watching a show with the curtains open just a crack. Figured no one could see in from that angle. Around 1 a.m., I got this weird feeling, like I was being watched. I brushed it off until I caught movement outside from the corner of my eye. I paused the show, and there was a face in the window. A man was standing on the fire escape, staring directly at me. I froze, not knowing what to do, but when I finally stood up, he took off. I called the building manager the next morning, and apparently, someone had been sneaking around the complex for weeks. I haven't left my curtains open at night since. Psycho Granny. I was maybe 8, which would make my sister 12. My brother wasn't born yet and I'm 9 years older than him, so had to be before then. Our parents were out for their anniversary dinner, which meant they'd be out till probably 12. My sister was very responsible and capable in babysitting me. I didn't find out till years later, but apparently my parents warned my sister that our grandma, my dad's mom, was manic depressive, which is old-timey talk for bipolar. They told her she was mad at my dad for holding some boundary with her and to not let her in or even respond to her if she came by the house. Of course, none of this was communicated to me. How could you tell an 8-year-old something like that? Anyway, a couple hours into the evening, we hear a knock on the door. My sister immediately shushes me and holds her finger over her lips. Robbie, I know you're in there. Robbie, come open the door. I remember it like it was yesterday. I could tell it was my grandma, but I could also tell that something wasn't right. My sister moves us to the hallway where we sit quietly out of sight of any windows. Grandma keeps pounding on the door demanding my dad let her in. Then it goes quiet for a while. I start to relax a bit. Of course that doesn't last. Suddenly a bedroom window starts getting slammed and my grandma sounds like a fucking demon screaming for my dad. I've never heard such anger since. She moves across the whole house pounding on every window. If she wasn't so old she would surely have broken a window with the absolute fury she was exuding. Then it goes quiet again. But now I know better than to relax. We are just huddled together in the hallway in complete silence. I'm shaking like a leaf and so is my sister. This grandma had played games with my sister to hurt my parents in the past, such as taking her to the mall and going to the register with some jewelry and then saying never mind, or buying the same jewelry for our cousin. Seriously twisted shit. As I'm typing this I'm thinking I need to talk to my therapist about it now, LMAO. So it's been quiet for a while. And out of nowhere, we hear Grandma putting on this sweet, sweet voice and directly addressing us and trying to coax us with candy to open the door. She always had a shit ton of candy around since she was also a diabetic in serious denial. This was the most surreal experience as she had just sounded like Satan himself and now she sounded like a sweet old granny again. She almost got me. Thankfully my sister was wise beyond her years and held me tightly. Finally it's quiet for about an hour and my sister says it's time for bed. My bedroom faced the backyard, which had a pool and a high wall, beyond which was a vast empty field with an old railroad track through it. I was used to hearing coyotes, foxes, and other animals outside. Right as I'm winding down to fall asleep the absolute loudest scratching on my window starts as if fucking Freddy Krueger himself was trying to haunt my dreams. I could see the silhouette of my grandma in the moonlight as it was a full moon that night. I haven't thought about this in years and my hair is standing at full attention on my neck as I'm typing this. Holy shit. No other windows got scratched that night. Just mine. Then it was over. I woke up the next day and my sister was telling our parents all about it. I couldn't even be in the room while it was being discussed. A few weeks later, she died from an E. coli infection. She died like Elvis, on the toilet. At her viewing they put on one of her classic flowy blouses and there was a breeze that lifted it up a bit, causing one of my cousins to shout, "She's alive," and run away. After the funeral, I told my mom and dad that I was glad she was gone, and according to my mom I said, "Grandma really stressed me out." She later told me no child of my age at the time should have to say their grandma stressed them out. Oh mom, she did more than stress me out. She terrified me more than any horror film or scary story or freaky night in the woods ever could, and I had plenty of those with my dad who was an absolute wild mountain man. Both my parents are gone now, and I wish I would have told them about my experience that night, but I trust that my sister told them what they needed to know. Now I have a 4-year-old daughter and my wife's parents are the complete opposite of my grandparents. Both sides of my family had seriously fucked up histories. It makes me cry when I look at pictures of her with her grandma and grandpa at their farm, riding a horse or chasing a chicken. I'm glad she gets to have the classic grandparent experience. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be talking to my therapist about this. Ps. I don't want anyone to think that I believe mental illness equals more violent. My wife and I both work in mental health, and despite my personal experiences with my psycho granny, I don't project that onto anyone else who suffers from mental illness. It manifests in so many ways, the vast majority of which are not violent. In fact, mentally ill people are far more likely to be the victims of violence than perpetrators. Why you shouldn't get out of your car at night. Quick disclaimer. This isn't my story, but from a good friend of mine, let's call her Jess for this instance, yet still sends shivers down my spine every time I think about it. So, my friend Jess once drove back home from her parents' house through a rural area in southern Germany. Least to say, it was late at night and a relatively quiet ride, until the road ahead was suddenly blocked by what she described as a large log. She was super annoyed by this because this was literally the only road she could have taken back without driving for another hour or so if she decided to drive back again, etc. When she got out of the car to further inspect the roadblock, she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Germany is pretty tame when it comes to wildlife in rural areas, so there's usually no serious wildlife encounters apart from hedgehogs or a deer, and began to move the log out of the way. Dunno how long it took her, but by the time she was finished, another car had stopped not far behind her, waiting for her to continue driving. At least that's what she thought. As soon as she got back into the driver's seat and continued her drive, she noticed that the car was following her. At first, she assumed it might have been coincidental because on a singular road with nowhere else to go, it was only natural that the other car would take the same route as her. But it got weirder as soon as they entered the next town and the car was still following her. She panicked, called the police, informing them about the situation and that she's driving home so that they can intercept the stranger as soon as they arrive at her home address. Since she was relatively close to her house already, she knew it'd take the police probably a few more minutes till they got there as well, so she decided to park a few houses away to not appear suspicious. She continued to sit in the driver's seat to see if the car was still around, and indeed, the stranger even parked directly behind her. At this point, she had the pepper spray at the ready, the doors locked from the inside, and was obviously super anxious when a man got out of the car and walked up to her window, waving at first and gesturing towards the back of her car. Confused by this, she decided to roll down the window a tiny bit to ask what's up with this guy. The man explained he had only been following her till now to tell her that, while he approached her car by the roadblock, a stranger had snuck into her trunk and is probably still there. Jess was absolutely bewildered yet terrified by this. She couldn't believe the guy outside her window at first, but he then showed her that he's called the police prior to their conversation on his phone, so she trusted him enough to get out of the car. Soon after, the police arrived, opened her trunk and arrested the guy that had been hiding in there. Turns out her initial stalker was telling the truth and was really trying to help her out. I don't really have the details on who the guy in the trunk was, but I've been told he was definitely having ill intentions, probably breaking into her house or whatnot. I never drove around with an unlocked car. The ones I drove don't lock automatically, since then, and always check every window in my trunk before I get into my car. Ps. The car she drove at that time was a Škoda Octavia, so the trunk was directly connected to the front of the car, which makes it even scarier since the guy could have just crawled to her from the back seat.